Not only does A Midsummer Night's Dream have three plots and occupy three very different imaginary spaces, three different kind of conceptual universes that don't naturally belong together, but are artfully woven together throughout the five acts. It also has three different literary forms. It is a play in blank verse, unrhymed iambic pentameter, but also sometimes in rhyming verse and in prose. Three different literary forms woven together, and Shakespeare moves in and out of these different forms throughout in a fairly complicated and sophisticated way. This is not easy to do, and it's another way in which Shakespeare is kind of elevating the formal sophistication of English drama, even in a play like this, which is considered a kind of elementary for kids. Right? Well, he's setting a new standard. In there are at least three. In there are actually different kinds of rhyming verse with very different kinds of meter. Sometimes there are songs which are not on iambic pentameter at all. Sometimes it's iambic pentameter couplets. Sometimes it's something else. Sometimes there are shorter rhymes that are happening, including, and of course, there is the play within a play, which is primarily in rhyme. What is the difference between these forms? Some people will tell you iambic pentameter is a high style, it's lofty. Prose is low down, is comic, is everyday. This is generally true, but not absolutely true. These distinctions are not hard and fast. You can't check the book and be like, oh, it's in verse, therefore this person is lofty. People say a lot of idiotic and low down and base things in verse in Shakespeare. People say a lot of profound and artistic and lofty things in prose. Both those things happen. The prose verse distinction in terms of meaning is loose. The distinction that is exact, that you should never miss, is that when Shakespeare changes from one form to another, something changes, and you, as an English major, should never overlook that. Just as it's like changing the key in a piece of music. It matters. It's a major shift. If he's going along in his unrhymed verse, the blank verse, the iambic pentameter with no rhymes, 5 beats, with the beats on the second, fourth, sixth, eighth, 10th syllable, and then he moves into rhyme, something just happened. And you should ask yourself what happened. It's not always the same thing, but something happened there and you should pay attention. If he's rhyming and he stops, something just happened. If he's been in verse and he switches into prose, if he's in prose and someone switches into verse, if a character is prosing right along and someone else walks on stage and they start talking to that person in verse, something just happened there. Something happened and you should pay attention to what it is. There's a lot of rhyme in this play. Shakespeare's going through a kind of back to rhyme phase in the 1590s. I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. And of course, the mechanicals are actors in the play within a play, love them some rhyme. Here is some verse, some rhyming verse that is not anything like iambic pentameter. This is, if you have the new Oxford edition, this is on page 1090. In any case, it's in scene 2, or act 1, scene 2, around line 22. If you have a different edition, your line numbers will vary. Bottom the Weaver, greatest actor of his generation, is giving an example for his castmates of the great how to play a tyrant such as Hercules, which is his word for Hercules. The raging rocks and shivering shocks shall break the locks of prison gates, and Phoebus' car shall shine from far, and make and mar the foolish fates. Brings a tear to your eye, doesn't it? Okay, that is ridiculous. In fact, I'm going to use a technical, poetic term here, that kind of sucks. It's deliberately mocking a kind of bad poetry. Is that iambic pentameter? No. Is that iambic? Oh, yes. The even syllables are stressed very heavily. It's more regular iambic than Shakespeare's own iambic pentameter is. Shakespeare varies the pattern now and then so it doesn't get incredibly boring. This This doesn't have the ability to vary the pattern, partly because there are only 2 feet per line. These are 4-syllable poetic lines. That's very short. It's very sing-song. It's hard to do much in it. The raging rocks and shivering shocks shall break the locks of prison gates. You know, boy. Now, the mechanicals rhyme a lot because their idea of theater is terrible. Or rather, their idea of theater is out of date. Out of date for Shakespeare. I know all of Shakespeare looks like one undifferentiated, long ago old-timiness to you. But remember, for Shakespeare and his generation, there's a present and a past and a more remote past and stuff that hasn't happened yet. For Shakespeare has a perspective on time around him. Like for Shakespeare, the 1560s isn't that long ago. The 1580s just happened, brother. Right? It's not all the same. There's a past, and this play is extremely modern. I ask you to think of A Midsummer Night's Dream not as a classic, timeless work of art that has been like this way forever, but to imagine it as a very up-to-date, innovative, formal breakthrough, the most modern of plays by the most modern of playwrights in its moment, because that's how the first audiences experienced it, as something new, something hip, as something, oh, we're moving forward. This is different. One of the ways Shakespeare creates this effect is kind of affectionately mocking things that had gone before. So the mechanicals are a tool for many things, including mocking older, outmoded forms of theater, especially kind of amateur, pre-professional, traditional English theater that tended to be very rhyme heavy. And that Shakespeare is mocking is differentiating his theater from that theater. That's the old thing, those guys. It's warm-hearted, I think, right? It's kind of like listening to a contemporary hip-hop artist kind of mockingly parodying 80s rap, right? Big Sneakers, Run DMC, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about, bear with me. I'm aging. So that rhyme in all that rhyme in Act 5 in our kind of catastrophically ill-conceived Pyramus and Thisbe play is a parody of how things used to be. There used to be amateur English drama that was rhyme heavy, that was done by guilds, that happened on holidays in your town, on religious holidays in your town. It was generally very religiously oriented. And by this point in history had been banned for religious reasons, not because the authorities hated religion, but because it was associated with an earlier form of with Catholicism, which was now officially on the out, so we're just not going to have those plays anymore. In the 1580s, during Shakespeare's 20s, a bunch of other playwrights of his generation, some of these gentlemen, like Marlowe, like Kidd, established unrhymed verse, iambic pentameter without rhyme, our friend blank verse, as the standard, the norm, the go-to line for English drama. That is the hip. That is the modern form. This is, quite literally, the beat. This is our 5-stress beat that we are going to run through. It's a workhorse. You do damn near everything with it. Shakespeare does that too. Iambic pentameter is his central form. Unrhymed iambic pentameter is his most central form. He opens his play with it. He can do it too. But notice how much of the rhyme there is not in the clowns. I said there's a back to rhyme moment. One of the things Shakespeare is doing in this play, and a few others that he's writing around the same time, is recapitulating that lost form, bringing back rhyme, not the old unhip way. Let me bring that back in a new, hipper way. Let me show how it works. It can be modern. It can be up to date. It can be sophisticated and lively. But in the same play, he's showing people ineptly doing rhyme the old way. I'm going to bring back this particular style, which has been out of fashion in theater. I'm going to make it fashionable again. And Shakespeare in the 1590s, the late 1590s, is a very fashionable playwright. You're kind of hip gentlemen in London, really like, they want to go see Shakespeare. This isn't true later in his career, but there's a moment in his early 30s where he's like super fashionable. And but at the same time, I'm going to show you, I'm not foolishly doing that old-fashioned thing. So I'm going to show you a loving parody of that old-fashioned poetic form. That's how they used to do it because they were square and old-fashioned, and that's your grandma's idea of a play. But then Shakespeare's going to do his rhyme, his way, up to date.